So yeah, again, so if you've been paying attention at all to the main chat, Gain chat in the server, you'd see that a good topic came up recently, and the topic was about the different types of hypertrophy. Okay, and if you aren't familiar, you may have actually seen the words sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and myofibrillar hypertrophy before. You might have seen these words thrown around, and you might have been confused as well. You might have, like many of us, when we see those terms, because they come up every once in a while, but it's not ultra common. But when it does come up, it's like you have to kind of refresh your memory as like, wait, why is this wrong again? It actually stirs up some interesting conversation around the topic of how muscles grow, or at least helps you, assuade your fears that maybe you're wasting your time in the gym, depending on the way that you lift. And so, if you've been paying attention to Gain Chat, you might have seen that this term sarcoplasmic and myofibrillar hypertrophy came up, and really it seems to always come out of this one particular population of lifter, and that population tends to be people who are currently or formerly were powerlifters who are making their way over to lifting more like a bodybuilder. It's funny because I have a personal theory on this, and actually, I've written about it kind of extensively in the past. Probably written terribly, because I wrote it, I think, a couple of years ago or maybe a year ago. But it was about how basically like CrossFit, for example, and the popularity of CrossFit roughly around like 2013 spurred on like this, this decades-long reign of a lot of these Olympic lifts, which are awesome. Like if that's your thing, that's great. But it spurred on this, this popularity of the big three, for example. And it because of its popularity, you had a lot of people influenced into lifting this way. And the thing was, the people that inspired these people the most to lift this way were people who were highly marketable. And what does that mean to be highly marketable? It means that you look like a Greek god. So if anybody is familiar with CrossFit, who really is like the face of CrossFit? It's this guy named, I believe it's Matt Frazier. And Matt Frazier, for those of you who don't know, was sort of built like, a Greek god, but he also happened to be like the strongest, fastest, he was just an all around like badass athlete. So a lot of people got into this basically to look and be like Matt Frazier. But Matt Frazier is one of these one-of-a-kind people. And what they also don't realize about Matt Frazier is that he also, in addition to lifting for, powerlifting, was also, incredibly lifted also as a bodybuilder as well. And I don't know that many people knew that, at least at the time. Maybe they know today, but they didn't know it at the time. And like I alluded to earlier, I believe, and this is just my own belief, there's nothing really more than just what I've seen to back it up. I believe that a lot of people get into lifting this way thinking that if they just stick with it long enough, they'll end up looking like these people. In other words, they wanted to get the look as a sort of primary motivator, and the lifting of the weights was secondary, but they would never admit it. They really would never admit it to themselves. Now, people will say I'm wrong, and I don't know. I just call bullshit. I think people want to look good primarily. I think that's really, I think it's always, I don't want to speak in credit, like just strictly in generalities, but I really do think it's like the number one motivator for people who pick up a weight. They want to look better. They want to look good. And the problem with, being in the powerlifting camp is that there's no guarantees that you are going to look good. There are so many other factors that go into it, such as your diet, whether or not you are actually training to look good. And without getting too much into the details on this, as I've already alluded to earlier, there is this confusion from this camp, or I don't want to say confusion, but there's an assertion by this camp of people who are currently or formerly were powerlifters that believe that you don't actually grow new muscle fibers by lifting according to bodybuilding, according to the sort of dictates of bodybuilding. So what does that mean? It means that lifting weights in the maybe 6 to 30 rep range is, yes, will it make your muscles appear bigger? Yes, this is what they believe, that yes, it'll make your muscles appear bigger, but will they actually grow new muscle fibers? They believe not. And the reason they believe this, at least my understanding of why they believe this, is because before much research was done on the topic, there was a discrepancy, there was a disparity between the size of certain bodybuilders and how much they could lift, separate from these smaller guys who could lift a lot more. So for example, we've all seen this actually. We've all seen like skinny young people, deadlifting like 600 pounds or 700 pounds. And it's like, holy crap, that guy's strong. That guy is strong. Some of these people are just pure genetic anomalies. But then you take a bodybuilder who's like twice that person's size and you put them on the same weight. They can't get it up. So that discrepancy necessarily led to the understanding that there's something going on here. That bodybuilder is not as strong as this powerlifter. Like, what's the reason for that? And the reason for this will later be, I'll reveal it shortly, but it led them to believe, again, that they weren't growing, bodybuilders were not growing muscle fibers, myofibrillar hypertrophy, in other words. They weren't growing the muscle fibers that actually caused you to be stronger. They were instead experiencing what is known as sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is understood to be an inflammation process of the muscles, but actually not the creation of new muscle fibers. And the sarcoplasmic, the expanding of the muscles, being and this is a real phenomenon, by the way. This isn't some like thing that they made up. This is actually real. That sarcoplasmic proteins actually fill the muscles, making them appear bigger, making them bigger. And it's similar to the way that creatine works, and similar to the way that just having a lot of carbohydrates and fluids will fill the muscles. They'll still appear strong and aesthetic. They will still appear dense and aesthetic. This is subcutaneous water that is actually, most of our muscles are actually water, and so they look and feel bigger, but they don't actually make you stronger. However, this is actually not the reason for this disparity between the skinny powerlifter versus the bodybuilder. This isn't actually this doesn't actually explain the disparity, according to the latest and greatest research and all that and all the rest. And so what we've actually discovered is that it is actually not true that you don't build new muscle fibers in the 6 to 30 rep range. You actually do. This was proven by, I think, Brad. I always get his name wrong. I won't even say it because I don't want to say it incorrectly. But this guy's famous researcher, and he's extremely well respected, and was able to prove that from in the 6 to 30 rep range, myofibrillar hypertrophy was actually something that actually does occur. But what's also true is that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy seems to be an effect of actual muscle growth itself. And so you have these two things that happen at the same time across the spectrum of rep ranges. So, you could look at people like Jay Cutler, for example, who lifted pretty much exclusively in the higher rep ranges, and and so this guy, and you look at, obviously he's on a lot of gear, but everybody's on gear at the top of the hierarchy. So everybody's on gear. It's like, well, so if all things are accounted for, everybody's on gear, and they all have the best genetics in the world. You could just take a look at a couple of these people and be like, well, it works for that person, works for that person. Really, what it comes down to is that, I guess the general takeaway of this is just that what we now know is that we knew this, but like now we kind of really know it, that different things work for different people. Like there's many ways to grow muscle, and you do grow muscle, by the way. If you look at like bodybuilders who go into like Mr. Olympia every year, the ones who start off at like getting 8th place, and then every year they go up in ranking, they didn't go up in ranking because they added water to their muscles. They go up in ranking because they actually put on more lean muscle mass. Is there such thing as the inflation of muscles because of sarcoplasmic hypertrophy? Of course, but it's more of what's come to be understood as a side effect of the actual muscle growing process. So I guess kind of the takeaway here is if ever you see somebody throw out this like sarcoplasm, in the 6 to 30 rep range, you don't actually grow muscle. It's just false, on its face. And it doesn't even pass a smell test, really, because you're going to tell me that Ronnie Coleman is all water, really? Or using him as an example now is kind of bad, but like Jay Cutler, you're going to tell me that he lifted in this like really high rep range. You're telling me that that's just all water, right? Like he's no stronger than, he's no stronger than like a small little skinny kid. That's strictly all water. Here's the thing. Powerlifters train for powerlifting. So they get under a barbell and they do squats or they do deadlifts and stuff like that. They practice that. They do that every day. They practice these movements. And there's also the neural pathways. Like strength training is a neurological it's a neurological event, I believe. It's one of these things that you're building neural pathways to help you be stronger. It's a very technical thing. It's a skill-based thing. But if you took a bodybuilder and you said you could only deadlift and you can only train like a powerlifter for the next 6 months, that bodybuilder is going to get really strong on those pulls, on deadlifts and squats and all the rest. If they're only allowed to train that way, because they have the muscle mass. I mean, the muscle mass is there. So their potential is way higher, and they will be able to perform way higher if they were able to dedicate to that type of thing. But this is something I'm still doing my reading on, but this is my understanding of it. This is what I believe to be true. Again, it just doesn't, to me, at the very essence of it, it doesn't really pass the smell test. And the smell test being you're telling me that the Olympic bodybuilders, are literally just all water or sarcoplasmic proteins, that they're just not strong at all. It just doesn't. It's obviously not true. It's obviously not true. Is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy basically cell swelling? Yeah. Well, you have to. You can if you you might want to move the question over to the Ask Me Anything chat, Thomas, just so that people don't get confused. But I will say, okay, so is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy basically cell swelling? It is. It is. As far as I understand. Look, I'm not an expert in this, but it is, in essence, you can think of it that way. I'm texting and driving like a man. Hell yeah. Yeah, you could think of it basically like self-swelling. Yeah. As far as I understand, I'm probably butchering this stuff because I'm obviously not a PhD in this topic. I don't I don't deeply understand this stuff, but that's my understanding as well. And here's what I know it's not. People, they try to. There are ways of there are allegories to the way that creatine works, filling your muscles with ATP, basically, the energy, the stuff of stuff that gives your muscles energy, that actually do hydrate your muscles as well, so that makes them bigger. Creatine makes your muscles look bigger. You'll hold more water, you'll retain more water. So there's this sort of allegory to something like that. It's not that. There is something called sarcoplasmic proteins, which do result in this swelling. That's true. I don't know if you were here for the beginning, Thomas, but or for the part where I talked about this, but this seems to be a side effect of actual muscle growth. So the muscle growing process, myofibrillar hypertrophy, results in sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. As to the amount per rep range, I am not 100% sure about this, but I do know from the 6 to 30 rep range, you do find, and even above I've seen, that you do find muscle growing happens, it occurs. I think we're talking inches when we say there's differences from, 1 rep maxing to 30 plus. I think we're talking about very small differences in muscle growth, actual muscle fiber creation. I think that powerlifters turned bodybuilders have a skewed understanding, and rightfully so, by the way, that it's way more on the powerlifting end. It's not actually, as far as I understand, it's not actually that. It's that these powerlifters are practiced in the act of powerlifting. They're just good at it. And they also have those, like I've already said, and I know this sounds sort of like a magical cop-out, but neural pathways, meaning that their brains are wired in a way to pull and be stronger. That is also more developed. It's it's a skill-based thing, sort of. But you're still growing muscle that actually has actual muscle fibers in it when you train for hypertrophy in the 6 to 30 rep range. Have any thoughts on practical implications of that recent study about protein intake not having an upper limit? Practical implications. Well, here's the thing. You will probably get the best results by splitting up your meals between 3 and 6. So 3, 4, 5, and 6 meals a day with enough protein to cover you all day long, so that you can. So having protein availability all day is probably your best bet still. Where the study does a good job of pointing out is that these I don't know if I could say this for certain, but it kind of brings back the idea of the anabolic window, which was kind of left behind in the more evidence-based community. It kind of revives the anabolic window. And if I were to give practical advice on this, as somebody who I'm not insanely familiar with the deepest parts of this literature, your best bet is spreading out your protein across the day, across multiple meals, but having it be slightly higher, as well as having your carbs be slightly higher after your workout. Okay, that is probably the most probably sound general advice I can give you. That you still want to have protein availability throughout the day, so splitting up your meals from 3 to 6 across the day. But with this new information in mind, you might want to have maybe double up the protein after your workout. Might be a good idea. I'm assuming there's a drop off in terms of the usefulness for this. I mean, I didn't do a deep dive into it, but from what I've read and understood, this is kind of what you should do. And it also puts to bed, here's one of the more useful things that it does. It puts to bed sort of this upper cap, this upper limit on how much you can have and absorb. And it always was it cut off at 30 grams of protein roughly. It's no more than 30 will do anything for you. Well, how did those people get those numbers? Well, how did they get 30 as a number? Well, it turns out that all the studies capped off at 30, and so they never had the information for any more than that. They just had, they they had up to 30. And they also used like these untrained individuals who, are basically, untrained, and the people that they used for these studies were not really like people who are doing what we're doing. So the information is a bit skewed. So you could basically, the big takeaway I would say is this, and I've already kind of given you good takeaways, but here's one last time. The upper limit on protein availability, the ability to absorb protein, is higher than we thought. However, a good practice seems to be to continue to spread out your protein throughout the day across your meals. That seems to still be, even with this new information, that still is probably your best bet. Again, maybe raise the protein a little bit higher after your training. As a new lifter in his mid-30s, without a history of athletics, the current landscape seems overwhelming. Focus on bodybuilding, do starting strength, eat 1 gram of protein per kilogram body weight. You should see rapid gains doing anything. How does one know they're on the right path, particularly if they don't see these rapid gains? That's a great question. So the question is, how does one know they're on the right path, particularly if they don't see rapid gains? It's like my initial reaction to this is, I'm trying to think if I could maybe give an even better answer here, because I don't know the exact situation you're in, but you do say as a new lifter in his mid-30s. Okay. So, without a history of athletics, the current landscape seems overwhelming. Focus on body weight. Well, I wouldn't focus on body weight. I mean, could you get away with focusing on body weight? Maybe. I think probably getting into a gym and start hitting the different machines and practicing with some free weights as well. Here's what I will say. When you first start training, we're all aware of we first start training, we're kind of given this 3-year window where we experience something called Newbie Gains. And you've probably heard of Newbie Gains. Newbie Gains is the phenomena where our bodies are so ready to receive stimulus from lifting weights that we do make rapid gains even when we're not training at our most intelligently. I'll put it that way. So for example, if I tell you, if you're a brand new guy and you go to the gym and I say to you, okay, I want you to lift with this tempo, with this level of intensity at 2 RIR, reps in reserve, that means. So I want you to two reps in reserve, and I want you to use perfect form and all this stuff. You're going to look at me like I'm crazy, because you're going to pick up that weight, and there's only one way that you know how to move that weight. It's the way that you're going to move that weight. It's like there isn't really this, like, you don't have the control or the sense of control. It's really all you have is the ability to move the weight, how you're going to move it. There's not a lot more that you could do. However, it is well documented that on average, even moving that weight around really clumsily, I'll get to your question in one second. Let's answer your first one. So even if you're going to move that weight around clumsily, your body's still going to react in a way that you're going to put on, like, some decent, you're going to make some serious gains. There's people who have put on in the first year 20 pounds of lean muscle mass in their first year. However, there are people with genetics like Woody Allen who will put on maybe 3. That's at the other end of the spectrum, like a pretty, that's low. That's a genetic thing. Now, so there's a lot. My point, again, pointing this out, is there's a lot of factors. However, those first 3 years are really a window where you're kind of given grace. It's a grace period in which your job is to learn how to lift properly with good technique, with mindfulness, with intentionality, and to really spend the time getting the technique down. Because kind of no matter how you're going to lift in that 3-year period, you're going to kind of come away with the same results. And they're going to be good results because of those newbie gains. That's a real phenomena. That's not like some magic thing. It's a real phenomena. Your body is ready to receive that kind of stimulus. You could train like a beast, and you could also, just kind of stare at the weights awkwardly. You might still make roughly the same gains. This is the phenomena. But after 3 years, roughly, could be shorter, could be a little bit longer. After those 3 years, after that grace period, things slow down a lot. Okay? Depends on the person again, but they slow down a lot. And what you're going to be left with is the ability to move weight well, in a way that will be, effective for growing muscle, or you won't. So you'll have either the ability to train really well, really smart with good technique, or you'll have wasted those 3 years kind of lifting like a goon. And so for a lot of people, what happens is when they, after that 3-year period, things slow down to such a degree that they're just like they're left like kind of just like, what the fuck? What's going on? Why am I so shit? And, outside of what's just naturally going to happen no matter what, you are going to need to basically, hold on, I have to sneeze. Excuse me. Basically, in those, so I guess what I'm trying to say here, though, is that in those 3 years, your job is to focus on good technique, on training, with good, like I said, with good technique. So it's going to be technique, and that is going to allow you then, after that 3 years, to then, by the end of the 3 years, you're going to be pretty good at lifting weights. Like you're going to, and this is maybe something that's new to people, that like, you can be good at lifting weights. I thought any idiot could do it. It's like, no, it's like actually not. Like there's actually, you're kind of never stop getting better at it. I mean, it's knowing how to target the right muscle group and driving tension into that muscle group, to understanding your own body, how to best hit that muscle group, what works best for you and your own bodies. This type of thing needs to be learned, and it takes time. Long story short, so you asked the question, and I don't want to be too long-winded about this. So how does one know that they're on the right path, particularly if they don't see rapid gains? My answer to you is, don't worry about rapid gains. Focus on technique. And there's a lot of people also that will say to you in your first 3 years, like, you have to focus on technique, and you have to also focus on learning how to drive really close to failure. I'm not in that camp. I think learning to drive with intensity is good, getting into that, like, inside that 5 to 0 RAR. But really, you're going to grow whether you're getting in that, 1 RAR versus the 3 or 4 RAR. So I'm not, and also, this is a great way to get hurt and to sidetrack yourself, especially in the beginning. Lifting with high intensity when you don't even know how to move a weight around, like you're asking to be out of commission. And so I'm not one of these people who says in those first 3 years you should be learning how to drive with intensity. I think it really should be like 80% technique, 20% intensity. So again, how does one know they're on the right path? Don't worry about knowing you're on the right path via gains. They will come. Lift with good technique. And here's one other thing that I just thought of. A lot of people don't do the diet side of things very well at all. They lift weights and they think that means that they could eat whatever they want and they're going to look like Brad Pitt from Fight Club, which I fucking hate. If you dial in the diet, you might see what you're actually achieving a lot sooner. And with that, I got to move on to other questions. But that's my answer. So you said, so you would say the window for rapid gains can be larger than a few months. Yes, it could be larger than a few months. Adjusting then for how one learns how to be more efficient, has better days and months. Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, stick with it. First 3 years. Tracking is huge for me. You can place your reps, weight into a spreadsheet, calculate weight. Yeah, that's a good advice as well. Definitely track your workouts, track your weight. Exactly. Great advice, Jeremy. Fergie says, should I read Fergie's comments? I feel like I shouldn't even read Fergie's comments. Do I need to give him the time of day? I guess he's an exclusive premium plus member, so I guess I should read this. I've got 2 + 7.5 more years for Newbie Gains. It's an athletic sport just like anything else. Wow, it was a wonderfully well-considered comment by Fergie. Thank you for your thoughts and well thought out answers. That was helpful. Good, glad. I'm a huge follower of the RIR view that Mike just said. I never tried to go to failure as long as progression result. You know what, Fergie, you're just winning me over, man. you're saying all the right things. What's next after Hyperion? Great question, because I have a definitive answer for you. I have a actual, and I'm allowed to finally make this public now, because it became official this week. We're going to be running Bow-Tied Ox's next program. I will be taking a part in helping build the program, but I 100% vouch for Bow-Tied Ox as a really somebody I trust wholeheartedly to make a program for us, and he will be crafting our next program. And I don't know about after Ox's program, but I think when this program's finished from Bow-Tied Ox, I think after that we are going to be crafting a true collaborative project next. After his next program, I think the two of us are going to actually go in and work out a program with a shared view, a shared approach, and that will be after Ox's program. So that's the next two programs. Will it be hypertrophy focused? Of course it will be hypertrophy focused, yes. Sweet, great combo for the two of you. Yeah, it's going to be great. Something that's less complicated that I can follow. Yeah, it's not. I understand what you mean, Fergie, about it being complicated. I would push back on the idea that Hyperion is complicated. I don't think it is, but I think it could be complicated to jump into a program at all, because there's going from not doing a program to doing a program is kind of complicated. But I do know what you mean. I mean, I could make it more complicated. Like I could have suggested RIR. That would have made it more complicated. Any other questions?